Consider this a professional courtesy.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Real Estate Realities with the Rebel Broker. My name is Robert Whitelaw, and I am the Rebel Broker, licensed real estate broker in the state of California, member of the National Association of Realtors. But please, don't hold that against me. Welcome back to it, folks. Just all kinds of weird stuff. This is bizarro world real estate today. Lots of contradictory things, and I'm always worried when I see contradictory things. You'll know what I'm talking about as we get deeper into the show, because there's just facts that are at odds with one another. And whenever you see that kind of stuff going on, I think that's worthy of taking a step back and surveying the horizon and see if there isn't a really big, scary thing over there somewhere. So we'll get into that. As always, the absolute best way to reach out is through the website. Head on over to therebelbroker.com. From there, you can send along any ideas, suggestions, observations, questions, musings, personal revelations, what have you. Feel free to send them along. Happy to hear them. The crazier, the better. I had a crazy one last week that was just awesome because it was so crazy. But it takes all kinds to make the world go round, right? At least that's what I keep telling myself. So welcome to this crazy ride of real estate. We're going to get into it. And also, I'll remind everyone that we are still doing the monthly Amazon gift card drawing, the $50 Amazon gift card. We're going to be doing another one for April. We'll probably do one either this Friday or the following Friday. I'm not sure whichever case the mood strikes me, I'll do it. So make sure to register if you haven't already. To do that, you can head over to the website, therebelbroker.com. Click on the big red button at the top of the page titled Take the Survey to Support the Show. You'll be supporting the show, of course, because that's what the button says. But at the same time, you'll be registering to win a $50 Amazon gift card. And as I said, we pick one winner in the first half of each month to get that. And I've lost count. I don't know if we're at $600 or $700 so far or beyond. It's been a while that we've been doing this, and I haven't really been keeping track. So join in. Congrats to the folks who've already won. Good luck to the folks who have not won yet. One thing I like to point out is that it's not a month-to-month thing, meaning if you registered for this a year ago, you're still in there. So it's not a gigantic group of people. It's a relatively decent sized list, but your odds are good. You're not one in thousands. You're one in hundreds. I think we're just shy of 1,000. So you're not even one in thousands. So your odds aren't horrible. So it's much better than the lottery, and it doesn't cost you $1 for a scratcher. So head on over to the Rebel Broker, click the big red button, and there you go. Now, if you'd like to join the Rebel Underground, which is sort of those folks who've stood up and said, yeah, I would like more from you. You haven't, and you still haven't gotten it if you've joined. I'm still working on that. And I know here we are in April, and my plan was to start rolling out stuff in January. But the plan is still there. It's still going. Things have just gotten super busy. The best way to join the Rebel Underground is to text the word Rebel Broker to the number 44222. That's text the word Rebel Broker to the number 44222. Or you can go to the website, therebelbroker.com, and there's a variety of places. There on every player that plays the show, there's a button that says Join the Rebel Underground. I think there's a couple other buttons on the website. So easy to join. So go ahead and jump in. The water's great, and we'd love to have you. So let's jump into this. I have several articles I think that will take up our time, but there's tons more, and I'm sure you all can suggest other things that you've encountered that would also fit the bill. In fact, I have a really good example of that from a listener. Daniel, I'm not going to give out his last name because that's just not cool. Why would I want to out Daniel like that as a listener to the show? And I don't have his permission to do so I'm not going to do it. However, judging by his email address, he is a real estate guy of some kind. I'm not going to say what the email address is because that wouldn't be cool either. But he says, Robert ran across an article on mobile home delinquencies. I'm curious as a numbers guy if I've seen similar stories, and as someone looking for a nosedive in the market, mobile homes is not my cup of tea. But my ears are open to opportunity. Thank you for your time. So I went ahead and checked that article out, and sure enough, it's from Business Insider. Headline is people have stopped paying their mobile home loans, and it's a warning sign for the economy. Now, so it's one of those things where you have to understand the folks who exist at these various levels, right? Now, mobile homes are the most entry level of entry level, right? We've talked a lot about mobile homes in the past, and as a place to buy to live, I don't suggest it. As a place to buy the park and rent out the units in it, we've had guests on that do this and have amazing success. And you know what? It's fan-freaking-tastic because you're not all you're responsible for is the electricity to the property, water to the property, and sewer to the property. So if there's a plumbing problem, if a toilet stops working, any of these things, you're not usually renting out the mobile home. You're usually renting out the space to the person who owns the mobile home. So they're responsible for all the upkeep. You're just charging for the rental of the space, and you're charging for whatever other amenities you provide, whether it's cable TV or whatever else. So from that standpoint, I think they're a good thing. From I'm going to live there, to picking a place to buy to live, I have very bad stories to tell. I've told them here on this show before in terms of mobile homes. But, for some folks, it's the only way to go. So when we've talked about the circumstances under which it might be okay to buy a mobile home, right? The circumstance where the park is run entirely by one dude who doesn't live in the park, right? The way I would suggest owning mobile homes, in fact, is the way I wouldn't want to live in one. Because if that person suddenly decides that it makes a whole lot more sense for them to kick everybody off of the land and build townhomes there, well, then that process is going to start happening. And I have seen communities where this happened. There's a big horror story that came out of Santa Cruz County where this happened. I don't know. God, it's got to be more than a decade and a half ago now. But property values were just so high that it made sense. And so every single rule that could be invoked to kick people out or and get rid of them. And we had people who were spending $400,000, $500,000, $600,000 on this amazing mobile home park that had a view of the ocean. And some people were planning on living there to retire, and this was their retirement, and suddenly found they had to leave because they didn't clean the moss off the side of their unit. And you discover that these mobile homes are they cost more than they're worth to remove from the land. So suddenly you have nothing. Your hundreds of thousands of dollars turns into $0, and that's bad. So anyway, that's another story. As all of you know, I'm distracted by the shiny things and often go into the tall grass. I'm pulling myself back. You're welcome. So let's talk a little bit more about this. Now, the folks who tend to live in the mobile home parks, at least here in my marketplace, that is the most entry of entry level, right? If you're going to buy a mobile home, you're doing that typically because you cannot afford anything else. On the desirability scale of housing, it is at the bottom, typically, right? Are there some amazing mobile home parks? Absolutely. In fact, I am in escrow on a home that's in a mobile home park that really can't even be called a mobile home park anymore. All the properties have been converted to real property, all that kind of wonderful stuff. So they're officially real property now. They're on the tax rolls as real property. But in any event, by and large, what you're seeing are the folks that tend to be at the more challenged level in terms of their ability to buy, right? And that's why they're there. And it's a great segment of the market because it fills the needs of those folks. Delinquencies on mobile home loans have increased by 2 percentage points over the past year, according to research cited by UBS. The rising delinquency rate, combined with signs of stress in other areas of the consumer finance market, suggests there's a two-speed economy. The delinquency rate on mobile homes has increased by 200 basis points or 2 percentage points over the past year, according to research by UBS. The 30-day plus delinquency level is now about 5%, the highest level since 2005. Now, what's scary is what else was happening at around 2005. These were when you want to look at things that are indicators of bad stuff to come, you always want to look at the canaries in the coal mine, right? Which is one reason why we look at some of these other areas. It's one reason why we focus on areas like Phoenix and Miami and other what I call bellwether areas that are those canaries in the coal mine that can often give us some insights into stuff that's coming. And in those communities, the folks that are having the toughest time are the folks who are typically closest to the edge of not making their bills are the folks who are living in mobile homes. So that's an interesting thing to note, and it's something to note because the last time this happened, it coincided with when we were just leading up to the downturn in the real estate market. It goes on to say the increase in the number of struggling mobile home borrowers suggests that a large chunk of these people haven't benefited from the economic growth of the past 5 years or past few years, despite the low unemployment level. Quote, according to UBS, the quote is, "We interpret this data to mean that these individuals have not largely benefited from these macro dynamics and may also be disproportionately exposed to industries that have experienced compression rather than expansion in the current economic conditions, such as retail or some areas of energy extraction." And it goes on here to give the single-family residential home loan 30-day delinquency rates and the mobile home loan 30-plus delinquency rates. And you can see that, we're up around 5%. The delinquency rates on single-family residential homes have been declining over the last year. They're now down below 2%. So clearly this is showing a weakness specific to the mobile home market that has really skyrocketed really since the third quarter of 2016. All through 2017, it was just rushing up to 5%, which is a little bit creepy considering how fast that happened. Right through the end of 2016, right through 2017, these numbers have been bad. A couple of bullet points they give here. About 3 in 5 consumers with an annual income below $40,000 indicate that their earnings barely or do not cover their expenses. Lower income earners are often renting and carrying non-mortgage debt, such as credit card, auto, and student debt, at levels similar to or higher than the period before the financial crisis. More than 1/3 of borrowers in this demographic report misrepresenting their financials in loan applications. Let's read that one again. More than 1/3 of borrowers in this demographic report misrepresenting their financials in loan applications. So are we seeing sort of a repeat of stated income where that's exactly what was happening? Folks were misrepresenting their financials. And to what degree? I realize this is probably a general question that was asked, but I'd want to know how many folks that misrepresented then went on to get their loan approved. How much did they misrepresent? Was it a casual omission of some private debt that they owed a family member or something else? Or what? And those are things I'd love to know. Next, while delinquency rates among student loans remain the highest of any consumer asset class, remember, we were seeing folks, the data we were sharing last year, we saw folks who after being out of school for what? I think the number was 5 years, had still not made a single payment on their student loan, and then they were delinquent, right? You're supposed to make payments the year or the year after you graduate. Next, the new tax law is likely to benefit middle-income borrowers, but it could have limited benefits for lower-income borrowers. Quote, "We believe weakness in these two groups will drive higher credit losses at some stage over the next few years, particularly in credit card, installment, and student loans, with macroeconomic inflection from job growth to job loss as a likely catalyst." All right, so there we can talk about instability at the lower earning end, right? So the big question would be, how much does that feed the beast that pushes a broader downturn if things get much worse there? Now, we can say that over the last couple of quarters, we haven't seen the continuing ramp up in the delinquencies on mobile homes. It looks like it peaked around the middle of 2017 and actually dropped off a little bit. But we're going to want to keep an eye on this simply because, as mentioned, we're seeing some pretty crazy numbers here. Now, at its peak in 2003 and 2004, we were seeing mobile home delinquency rates up around 6%. Let's see here. Yeah. So we haven't nearly reached that point yet, but it is on a trajectory that concerns me in terms of where it looks like it's going. All right. So let's go ahead and talk about some other interesting tidbits of news. Now, at the same time this is happening, new unemployment claims hit the lowest number in 45 years. So what does that tell us? We're at this point where should be celebrating the lowest unemployment rates in 45 years. And it makes you beg the question, why are we not seeing this being an effective solution to this mobile home thing, right? The report states that for the 4-week average of Americans applying for unemployment benefits was 1 million, a big number, almost 2 million. According to the Department of Labor, this is the lowest level for this average since January 5th, 1974, when it was 1,838,000. This news echoes the last jobs report released March 9th, which put the unemployment rate at 4.1%, the lowest it's been in 17 years. The Federal Reserve predicted that by the end of 2018, the rate will hit 3.8%. So at a time when we're predicting great things for jobs, we are seeing at the bottom end of the earnings spectrum not that kind of reflection, right? You would expect things to be getting better, but they're not. So why is that? The argument we could make is that it's that while we may have a quantity of jobs, we don't have a quality level of jobs that uplifts folks at the bottom end of the spectrum. Now, granted, a lot of that is under the control of those folks. They need to acquire skills that earn more. They need to get experience that gives them the ability to take on more and more responsibilities, which would then equal more and more responsibility, which would tend to equal more income. But I find it very interesting that we have these two things sort of in contradiction with one another. Okay, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to talk about a possible breaking on house buying, which is interesting, given the other things we've talked about. But we're also going to talk about areas where the average worker can't even afford to buy a home anyway. So we're going to cover that data in just a minute. Don't go away. We'll be right back right after this.
Are you ready to jump in and start your search for your first investment property? Maybe you've decided that it's time to own your own home, or maybe you're ready to sell your home and move on to something new. No matter what your goal is, the Rebel Broker can help. That's right, aside from hosting this show, I am also the owner-broker of Whitelaw & Sons Real Estate Services right here in Silicon Valley. With over 25 years experience serving Silicon Valley, Morgan Hill, San Martin, and Gilroy, I or one of my great agents can help you achieve your goals in real estate. So if you're ready to look into taking that next step towards achieving your real estate goals, point your browser at www.soldbyrobert.com. That's www.soldbyrobert.com and get in touch. Let me show you how I will earn your business and your respect. Again, that's www.soldbyrobert.com, or you can call me at 408-852-0525. California Bureau of Real Estate ID 00984-909.
Welcome back, everyone. We're sort of covering a variety of different issues today. I suppose if we were shooting for a theme today, it would be things that make you go, in the one hand, we can talk about great unemployment numbers. We're talking about historically amazing unemployment numbers. And even when we sort of grok the fact that one of the most played with numbers is the unemployment number, right? And it's not a Republican thing or a Democrat thing. It's a politician thing. Whoever is in power at whatever given time wants to fudge the numbers in a way that makes things look better. So, it's always been that way. So the biggest example of that over the last 10 years has been fiddling with the workforce number or the number of folks who are actually participating in the workforce, right? Once you get designated as not participating, you're no longer counted as an unemployed person, but you should. Right? If the unemployment number is supposed to inform us about anything, it's that there are people out in the public who represent either cost or not a cost, right? If you're employed, you're paying taxes, great. But the folks who aren't employed are still consuming stuff as part of society, so they're unemployed. I don't care whether they've decided not to participate or not, they're still consuming resources. So they should be counted in those. So I've always made the argument that the unemployment number is actually quite a bit higher than it is. And also, it's difficult to compare current unemployment numbers to past unemployment numbers because about every 8 or 7 years, we fiddle with how that unemployment number is calculated. We do the same thing with inflation numbers, right? At some point, they stopped counting fuel and food on inflation, because if they did, we ended up with crazy inflation. You still have to pay for food and fuel, but it's just not part of the inflation calculation. So when someone tells you that inflation is only at 1.8%, you need to ask them what the real inflation rate is. And there's a variety of sites out there. I've put links in past shows to sites that'll give you what the inflation numbers are when you include all the stuff you actually pay for, and it ends up being quite a bit higher. And we've had the same discussion around unemployment. However, even when you make that argument, while you might say, arguably the unemployment rate is 2, 3, 4, 5 points higher than it really is because of fooling with it, clearly, though, you can't argue with the trend, right? We can argue about the specific number, but since we've actually been consistently calculating it, or at least over the last 5 years, even with the jury-rigged ways to make the overall number lower, the number's been going down. So whatever you picked as the higher number, that number's been going down too. So let's say you, for whatever reason, you think the unemployment rate's actually more like 10%. Well, or was 10% a couple of years ago, since the two numbers would still drop together, right? That's the point I'm making, that it's getting better. Whether you believe that we're starting from a good place or a bad place, the actual conclusion you want to come to is, given how things are right now, are we better today than we were a year ago, or are we worse? And no matter how you measure it, we're better, unless they fooled with the numbers over the last year. And to my knowledge, they haven't. So that's where I'm confused. I don't understand why at the same time we're seeing unemployment numbers the way we're seeing them, we're seeing continued stress at the low end or at the mobile home end in terms of folks going into delinquency on a mobile home. And then there is nothing worse than going into delinquency on a mobile home, right? And I'm not a mobile home owner. I help people buy homes that used to be mobile homes but are now are now real property. But I know the loan you get is more like a car loan than it is a mortgage for a mobile home. So the idea that folks are going into delinquencies on this is absolutely crazy. And I know in a lot of parts of the country, it's not even a huge chunk of money, right? And normally this is a loan that is less than $100,000, right? And you're then paying space rent for the unit. At least that's been my experience. So these folks are deciding, and what's also bizarre is that they're deciding not to stop making payments on the thing that is their home. It would be interesting to find out what the delinquency rates are on other things. What's going on with cars? What's going on with credit cards? Because remember, one of the theories I was throwing out there is that you would tend to see people making the same debt management choices in an upcoming crisis in a new way as they did last time, right? Because regardless of where the stress is coming from, the idea is you're personally going to start making the same cuts that you would under any circumstances. So, and one reason why, and this is something that did happen last time, one reason why we started to see people stop making payments on their homes back last time was the interpretation was they could wiggle through that one or stretch that one out over a much longer period of time than some of these others. They wouldn't stop making payments on their car because they knew someone would come and take the car away. So it's also not just about what's important, but it's also about what the repercussions are. Are you likely to have to lose control of the thing that you're worried about? So I think that's one reason why people make the choice to stop making payments on their residence first. I'm not sure how smart that is when we're talking about mobile homes. I'm not sure the exact same rules apply to mobile homes as would apply to a single family residential home, for instance. But it's kind of interesting to see how this is playing out. All right. Now, to sort of segue into this next one, in nearly 70% of U.S. counties, the average worker can't afford to buy a home. This is coming to us from Zero Hedge. They're quoting data from other places like other.So Data Solutions. So it's really more about, remember, we always try to figure out if we need to put on our tinfoil hat when we're talking about Zero Hedge, because sometimes they say some goofy stuff. And whenever they do, I step up and I argue against it. So I'm not going to full on subscribe to the tinfoil hat aspect of this, but their data that they reference is usually pretty darn good. In the latest quarterly report on housing affordability in the U.S., other.So discovered that median priced homes aren't affordable to average wage earners in an astounding 68% of U.S. housing markets. In its report, the company calculated affordability by incorporating the amount of income needed to make monthly home payments, including mortgage payments, property tax payments, and insurance on a median-priced home, assuming a 3% down payment and a 28% maximum front-end debt-to-income ratio. That required income was then compared with the median home price. So it's a scary number. They've got a map associated with this, so I'm going to strongly suggest if you want to learn more about this, go ahead and check out the website that I'll have a link to at the show notes for today's show. So head on over to therebelbroker.com, check out today's show notes, and you'll see them. It's going to be in the show notes on everything. So however you consume it, if you go to the description, it should be in there, but it'll be easiest to click on it from the website. But this map is kind of fascinating. It's got a bunch of circles. You can actually move it around and zoom into different areas. But it's where home prices are affordable or not for average wage earners. And the question that's asked is, median home price affordable for average wage earner, yes or no? And the no's vastly outnumber the yeses. And of course, the usual suspects are the West Coast, the New England area, lots of parts of Texas, surprisingly enough, and bizarrely, Idaho, Montana, Colorado, not surprisingly, Utah, Arizona, New Mexico, huge swaths of Texas, Minnesota, North Dakota, Florida, of course, is on that list. So many areas that the average person cannot afford it. Now, so that kind of also starts to beg the questions on the statistics. Because if you take the average income, I'd also love to know the median, right? Because the median is the actual middle point where half the people are above that point and half the people are below that point. The average can often not be that point. So it'd be interesting to see what's the weight of that in terms of the population. If more of the population is tending to be lower wage earners and a smaller chunk of people are just making a whole ton more, which would then make that average fall where it falls, but not necessarily be the median, right? Then that starts to give you an interesting look at things. Or is it not that? Is it actually distributed the other way? Are there more people that tend to make more than the average, and the folks who are at the bottom just make a whole lot less than they should in order to qualify, right? It could be lopsided in either one of those two directions. The hottest housing, according to this article, the hottest housing markets are seeing an exodus of working and middle-class individuals who can no longer afford to pay the high rents, let alone afford to set aside enough money for a down payment. 8 of the top 10 counties with the highest median home prices in first quarter of 2018 posted negative migration in 2017. Let's see. And some of those, and these are interesting ones to know, I think, because we've talked about this in terms of my local market, but I think these are interesting for folks to know across the country, and they list off some of these places. Kings County, Brooklyn, New York, net migration of 25,000 less. Santa Clara County, San Jose, my stomping grounds, a net loss of 5,559 people. New York County, Manhattan, New York, a net loss of 3,762. Orange County, California, a net loss of 3,750. San Mateo, Marin, Napa, and Santa Cruz counties. These are all my area. Santa Cruz County borders Santa Clara County. San Mateo borders Santa Clara County. Marin is the North Bay, so on the other side of the San Francisco, the Golden Gate Bridge. That's where Marin and Napa are. So this is really the Greater Bay Area. All going down. ATM's data found that this problem is getting worse, not better, with 41% of housing markets less affordable than their historical average during the first quarter. That's up from 35% the quarter before. Meanwhile, a staggering 73% of markets posted worsening affordability compared with a year ago. So where do we go with this? Now, granted, what this is going to eat into is the number of buyers, right? It'll reduce the number of buyers. But what does that mean in a marketplace where we're not building we're building what looks like to be about a quarter the number of homes as we were the last time demand was at this level, or the last time that markets prices were at this level? And when we think about that, it just feels so artificial, right? But if folks simply just say no and vote with their feet by leaving, what happens? It just seems like we're setting the stage for a interesting reaction to any economic downturn that could end up equaling a pretty large downturn in home values, or at least home sales prices. The last chunk of data, Rosenberg household buying plans to take a deep dive. This one's interesting because it seems to be pushing this idea that we're going to see a lot fewer buyers. In my marketplace, I am not seeing that yet. I know for a while here I was mentioning how anecdotally my real world ground experience was I was seeing a whole lot more people inquiring who want to sell their properties. My experience, I think, is a little bit skewed, as I mentioned before, because I sort of kicked in a little bit more effort into my advertising to attract folks who want to sell their homes. But I'll tell you, I have a coming soon property, right? That's right here in Morgan Hill. It's in an amazing neighborhood. It's your typical 3-bedroom, 2-bath home. This seller has known they want to sell for quite a while. I think they first reached out to me in November. So I was sort of looking at the market and gauging what I thought the market value would be at the time they want to go on the market. Well, we're now 2 or 3 weeks away from when they are going to go on the market. And sure enough, I just ran the latest numbers. And while this number wouldn't have worked in November, Now, instead of being overpriced by about $25,000, the property I'm going to list is now smack dab in the middle of what 3-bedroom, 2-bath homes in Morgan Hill are going for. The average sales price of a 3-bedroom, 2-bath home in Morgan Hill over the last 90 days was $846,000. And I'm going to be listing this house at $847,000. So in terms of being a geek numbers guy and ballparking where we needed to be, yay for me. But even when I made that estimation, I was like, this is insane. These numbers are nuts. But yeah, that's about what it's going to go for. And it wouldn't surprise me if it goes for more. And this is a home that's in fairly decent shape. It needs some TLC. So there's things that probably folks will want to do right when they move in. My sellers have freshly painted it. We've got all the inspections done. We're going to take care of all the Section 1 stuff as you'd expect. But there's things that will need to get done, and it still won't surprise me if I get multiple offers. Now, having said that, what I have done is coming soon marketing for this, which means I've done marketing on Facebook. I've done marketing on Zillow that is of a coming soon variety. I get at least 8 inquiries a day. We got so many requests to preview the property. We had to stop doing it. My sellers were trying to pack, and we had to stop doing it. I've actually had several folks who wanted to make an offer before putting it on the MLS. And we decided not to encourage that, simply because there's no question that once this thing goes on the market, there's going to be a storm of interest in it. And not because it's any amazing gem, it's simply because there are no other homes. The only other home that's even of the same size there's one listed at 900 and something thousand, which is freaking crazy. And then there's another one that I think is listed just under 900,000 at 899 or something like that. So it's just nuts. It's absolutely crazy. And in my area, I don't see these numbers that we're talking about here. And the reason I'm mentioning this is I need everybody to really try to apply what we talk about here to their local marketplace. Get the local feel for what's happening so you can understand if these are elements that are having a dramatic effect in your personal market. Now, again, so housing plan, take deep dive. Personal savings rate has continued to decline. The last month, it tumbled from 3.2% to 2.9%, the lowest since November of 2007, which is a reminder, is 1 month before the recession started. This incidentally explains the surge in credit card usage. The 13-week annualized credit card balances in the U.S. have gone completely vertical in the last few months of 2017, a troubling sign and yet another confirmation that U.S. household savings are almost gone, forcing Americans to resort to savings and indebtedness. Because remember, we're talking about credit cards, and this is another one you're going to want to look at. This chart is freaking insane. It's the 13-week annualized percent change in consumer loans credit cards, and it is vertical, going all the way back to 2011. This is nuts. I can't, there's no other time going all the way back to 2011 where we see the indebtedness jump as much as it has. What does it, and the question that gets asked is, what does it mean when we have booming unemployment and massive tax credits and household buying plans take a deep dive? This is what the dive looks like. Conference Board plans to buy homes, autos, and appliances have all plunged in the last 3 months. So in the first quarter of 2018, all of these intentions, whether it's automobiles, homes, or major appliances, have all dropped dramatically. So we're not setting the stage for a whole lot of buyers to be out there. Now, that's actually a good thing in my mind. And we talked about this in a show a couple of weeks ago where we saw other data was kind of pointing to a decline in buyers. But the reality is the only thing that's affecting this is price. That's it. It's not interest rates on loans. It's none of those things. It is strictly about price. And I'll tell you, when we look at this data in my local market, or when I look at this data and we try to interpret more of a broad market effect, this feels like the run up to a downturn. If you get people who simply opt out, then what happens to home sales, right? If people just suddenly back away. Now, the only thing that's going to prop that up is this dramatic lack of inventory. We still have such a low inventory that you could cut the number of buyers in half and we would still have multiple offers on homes. That's just a reality. But given the drop in this particular chart, now it's down to 5.5% in terms of what they're measuring here. But and so the scale isn't that gigantic, but it's definitely the lowest it's been since 2016. So interesting to keep an eye on it. All of them are there. There's not a lot of separation. They all seem to be going the same direction in terms of down. And what's interesting is we've seen that in a couple of cases in the past, going back to 2016. But these are so in sync, it seems to indicate a overall change in what people are thinking. All right, so now let's step away from that data for a second. You as a person walking around out in the world trying to make it through this topsy-turvy world of real estate, whether you're a real estate person or not, right? Whether you're just someone who's looking to buy or sell and you want to get a feel for what's going on with the market, depending on, and I know I have lots of listeners that are across the spectrum. I've got real estate agents. I've got investors who aspiring investors who've never really taken the plunge. I've got investors who've been doing it for a while. And I got other folks who just like to hear about real estate. What is the valuable information we can draw from this? One, renters keep on renting. I think that with this decline, you're going to see far fewer people saying, I'm giving you my month's notice that I'm going to move out. People are locking in what they want to lock in. I think that the mentality that goes along with this, the mentality that goes along with, I'm not going to buy a house, I'm not going to buy an appliance, and I'm not going to buy a car, spells, I'm going to sign a longer lease next time. I would actually make that part of my strategy. If I currently rent and I have folks whose leases are coming up in the next few months, I would look for plans to get leases and potentially to lock in these leases for longer periods of time. Why? Because I also think that at some point there's going to be a response. There's going to have to be. And if it's true in your marketplace, now the reason I say that in my marketplace, I'm still seeing tons of places getting built that are multi-unit, that tend to be apartment complexes. And if folks are this saving, or not savings, but what's really bizarre is we're seeing folks who say they're not going to buy automobiles, homes, and appliances, but we're also at the same time seeing an uptick in the number of people who are going into debt on their credit cards. Well, then what the heck are they buying? It sounds to me like folks are being forced into a situation where they're buying essentials with their credit card. And that's scary as hell, right? So that is an interesting thing. And it also spells a possibility that as new apartments come online, if you're currently renting a single family residential home, you may find yourself losing a renter, not to someone who's going to buy a home, but to someone who's going to a cheaper accommodation, that is going to move into a property that will cost them less. We may see a segment of the community that's out there renting regressing. And I think that it is important for you to understand if that's a dynamic happening in your community and responding appropriately, potentially coming up with a plan to retain them. Anybody who's ever rented knows that solid renters who take good care of your property and pay on time are like solid freaking gold. So if it were me, I would try to reach an accommodation with someone in order to make it possible for them to stay in your property. If that means giving them a discount that doesn't cut too heavily into your cash flow, that you may decide that that's worth it to you. If you're someone who's ever had a bad experience with a tenant, excuse me, or has heard any of the stories I've shared here on the show, you know what I'm talking about. If you've ever gone onto YouTube and looked at horrible tenant experiences, you know how valuable and wonderful a good tenant is. So work to try to keep those folks and see if you can't come up with accommodations. As far as what investors should be doing, it's still the same strategy as always. Once you find good deals, jump on them. But it seems to me like we're at a point where enough of these numbers are mirroring what we saw in just before the downturn last time, that we should all be coming up with backup plans and cautiously moving forward with any plans we have. I am still in the sell my house camp and then hold on to my cash, because I honestly think something's going to change in the marketplace that's going to work for folks who have cash ready to purchase properties. We'll see if that's true or not. I may end up being completely wrong and hosed, but that's fine. I have plans. I have backup plans. You all know me well enough to know I'm going to have a plan B. So anyway, that's about it. I hope this has been valuable for you. I think this is one of those times where we've got an awful lot of interesting numbers, some that contradict, that do seem to point us in a direction that caution is worthwhile. I hope that you've gotten something good out of today's show. The goal, as always, is to leave you with far more value on the table in terms of things to think about than time you spent listening. Hope we've accomplished that today, folks. Thanks again for listening, and I will talk to you all next time.